he gets a little more each day, a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. I don't believe they didn't know this from the very beginning, but I think if they just came out and said all of this at one time and that the country and the whole world had to lock down, I think you'd have just people could not emotionally deal with that much of a change in their life all at one time. It would threaten so many issues of a person's personal experience. I don't think, however, that they're really holding anything back that's catastrophic that we need to know about. Like, I don't think there's anything like that going on. I just think it is the timing in which they release the information so that everybody can psychologically move with it and be in this space. All right, so we are going to start number 3 of our support program and how to navigate uncertainty. And today I want to talk about I'm trying to keep up with what's going on from both a mindset perspective and the perspective of like, what do we do? So what we're really recognizing right now is the amplification of the situation, the emotions, the experiences, and the response that actually people are having to this. So in a way, this is actually really cool because it gives everybody a very heightened experience into not only themselves, but how the whole world is kind of operating right now. In professional development, which is the industry that I am part of and have been for a long time, something like this that amplifies things where people can really see it outside of the normal way that we live is a real blessing in a way, because so many people go through life in a way where they don't actually really differentiate between what's normal and what's not normal, how they're experiencing life, how other people are experiencing life, in order to get to the possibility for control over their own life and the ability to actually change it. So what's really cool about right now is that, and this is actually something to be grateful for, is that we get to experience life very different from the way that most lifetimes got to experience life. We knew life before this situation, so we have a contrast and a context in reference on that. And then we have life right now, the way that we're experiencing it in the moment, if you will, as how things are actually changing. And then we have ourselves in the middle of that. So we get to experience ourselves in how we're automatically kind of reacting to that. And we also get to experience what other people are going through. So like the emphasis on this call is amplification. And amplification can be both bad and good from a judgment perspective. It can be a detriment to our lives, and it can actually be a great blessing. And I want to talk to both of those things and kind of give you some teaching around how can you use it in a way to not only benefit you and other individuals in your life, but in a way where we can actually kind of see the programming that people are living their life by, because it's now amplified. So it's exaggerated, if you will. It's exaggerated in a way where you can very easily see by looking at other individuals what their core issues are. And you can also see your own. So even though that might be tough at times, it gives you some insight into things that you might need to work on for yourself, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But the amplification itself, as far as opportunity goes, is tremendous. And it's becoming more and more tremendous every day, meaning that it becomes more aware. It's easier to see if you get disengaged from the negativity of the negative, which I'll explain in a minute, and you get engaged in how you can be part of the solution. And I realize that for most people, part of the solution begins at home. It really does. It begins with understanding our own hardship, how this is affecting us, what the perceived threats are for our life, for our business, for our job, for our family, for our health, for the world, for like, how are we going to carry on after this? Because this, when this is over, it doesn't go away from our consciousness. Like when this is over, one of the things that I suspect is going to happen is there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, right? And a lot of different people. And what's really unfortunate about that scenario is that we don't get to the crux of how did people get through this or not get through it? What were the positives in this? What were the negatives in this? And what could we do as a society to kind of learn from it in a way, become more conscious, so that the next time we have a global challenge, we will already have some reference as to what to actually do with it. There have been global challenges before, but for most of us and most of the people that are listening to this, we haven't really experienced them. They were before our lifetime. So we really don't know. If we look back at, say, the world wars, if we look back at the flu in 1917, if we look back at the Great Depression, if we look back at the Dark Ages in history, if we look back at like the plague through Europe, like these are times of tragedy that are in our history that we're actually part of, but we don't really know how we're part of it because we didn't experience it. We don't know the transitions that were made up into how it affected us from a generational thinking perspective. But we are part of it. Like you, because you're alive right now, your ancestry basically indicates that you lived, your ancestors made it through those times. And that's important to know because you're the product of that. Yes, several generations removed, but you're still the product of it. So it's really important to consider that idea from a lot of perspectives. There is a Buddhist word that I want to share with you that I think that is really important right now. And the word is called Shenpa. It's Shenpa. And basically, so here's the thing about this word. Like you could look up the word, and they're going to give you a definition of the word. The idea about this word is far more than the actual definition of the word, which is more important than the definition, because the definition is kind of just like, it is more like the idea of repetitive, subconscious experimentation and expression in our life, which can be good or bad. However, what's really important to know about this word is the context in which it was created, which you have to do a little history research to understand that. And it's about being attached. Okay. So the actual definition is to be attached to something. But if you understand the Buddhist philosophy, that is what causes the pain and suffering in most people's lives is the attachment, the way that we psychologically, emotionally attach to things. And out of that psychological, emotional attachment, as life continues to change, which it always does, the problem that we experience is pain. We experience pain and suffering out of our psychological, emotional attachment to things. And that is the word Shenpa. But however, what's more important to that is to understand the context around it. And the context around it, I want you to think of it like this. It's more like being hooked, okay? So hooked means that something enters your consciousness. It is triggering something that is a wound in you. So that's a point of pain. That can be a point of like victimization, like you were victimized, doesn't necessarily mean that you have victim consciousness, but you could be victimized. It's a point of people breaking trust with you. And because of those things in your life, and yeah, there's several other things. I know that there's people like saying there's all these other things. I realize that. But for the point of this conversation, I want you to think about the idea of being hooked, because what happens is whatever that point of pain is, the attachment comes in and it hooks itself to the specific thing inside of yourself. So it hooks you as an individual. That's the important part. Because if we could kind of begin to understand how this amplification is hooking us individually, it makes a big difference in our life, because that becomes the process where we can be unhooked. So let me give you an idea about being hooked. You can look at this a couple of different ways. When we're hooked by other individuals, that means that we somehow make an agreement to buy into their manipulation, their influence, their rationalization, their charismatic message. And what I mean by manipulation can also be very much like that we have experienced working a job in corporations. So if you go way back to, say, World War II, after World War II, when we had a great big explosion of prosperity in this country, one of the psychological hooks in that was that if you give us loyalty, meaning you as the worker in life, us meaning corporations, we will give you security. So if you're not a conscious person, if you don't study consciousness, if you don't understand consciousness, then you're programmed with the idea of security in life. So what happens is that you look and make decisions based on the idea of security. What will make me secure financially, emotionally, in a relationship, psychologically? What will make me secure? And we start making decisions based out of that security. So when we make those decisions, we get hooked. We get hooked into the false agreement that that relationship is going to keep us safe and secure. And it's really the way most of us are raised. Unless we had really conscious parents, you were raised this way. You were raised with, here's the programs, here's the paradigms, here are the patterns, here are the roles that you need to play in order to be a safe and secure adult, so that you can raise safe and secure children, so you can have a safe and secure job, so that you can have a safe and secure life. And you can make it from birth to death without too much damage. Okay. That is the attempt of society today, to raise people to be able to move through the experience of life as we know it without too much risk, without too much damage. However, excuse me, the people that come out and do extraordinary things in their life go through a very different journey. The journey that they go through is that even though they may be raised with the idea of being hooked into this false agreement of security, at some point in their life, something happens that causes them to question that. And whether they're 100% conscious of it or they just have a kind of an inkling of it, the idea is that the security that they've been raised with, or that they see that other people believe in, they either intuitively or intellectually know it doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. How we are secure is based on consciousness and our intellectual capacity to make decisions in a moment, followed up by action, so that we know what to do in order to change our situation, no matter what it is. Can you look at a situation and say, I'm 100% confident in this situation, I can change because I understand the principles behind life. I understand the principles behind moving forward. I understand the principles behind fear and why people don't do those things in order to, create the life I want or get out of a situation, whatever it might be. And some people can do that and some people can't. We really don't know what is the difference between the ones that have the initial wake up, if so to speak, versus people that never wake up, like they never question society at all. They see it one way and they see it their entire lives. They're born into it, they see it that way, they die that way. So the people that start to question are the ones that have the potential to break free because they're allowing something different to come in their mind. But anyone at any time has the potential to be hooked into whatever the amplification is in the moment. That's a suggestion that something tragically could go wrong. I think this is the reason why we're seeing such amplification right now, because it's a constant suggestion of what can go wrong. So we have to be very careful as far as our environment goes, how we control our environment from a conscious perspective, what we'll let in, what we're going to keep out, only looking at the facts to be informed, to be able to make conscious choices moving forward. What's unfortunate is that a lot of people are still in denial. I've talked since our last call last Monday. I've talked to many, many people. I've had many, many conversations around people who do not know what's actually going on. They don't know the severity of it. And I think what's even worse is they don't know the options that are available for themselves, and in some cases their business, to be able to manage this and move out of it. They also don't know where they're vulnerable. So why is that? Because if I stay in denial around something that's amplified, I can believe in the hook. I can believe in that hook. And you might think to yourself, well, why would anybody want to believe in the hook? Because they bought into the idea of the hook. That's how they were hooked to begin with. Remember this, the human form, as far as like our spiritual DNA, our higher self, is always for growth. It's always for expansion. It's always for fuller expression. That means that once we become aware of what our purpose is, if we combine all of those things in ourselves, bring it to our work in this world, it can literally be magnificent, because it's not just for us, it's for other people. But if there's a place that I'm insecure in my life, what is eventually going to happen is that I'm going to buy into someone's amplification of a situation. That could start with my personal family. It could expand into small groups of society that are around me. It could expand into my work. It could expand into my business. It could expand anywhere. And if any of those places I get hooked into the idea that I must be, do, or have something in order to be safe, then I am in the hooking process. I'm part of that. My whole belief system starts to go into it. Now, here's the tragedy. The tragedy is when an amplification on the magnitude of what we're experiencing now happens, it even threatens the people that believe in their hook. So for those individuals, they have one of two options. They can either start to become conscious and see what their options are, or they can go into complete total denial. And because things are changing in a way that is not normal, that supports them, they make themselves very vulnerable to a serious possible problem in their life, in their business, in their family, whatever. Shenpa means hooked. It means hooked in a way where I can't break out of my thinking to see something different. Now, the major opportunity for people is to understand something very fundamental about human nature. And I've been talking about this for a long time, because through the transition of the internet coming into everybody's life, the one thing that I've been able to experience is how people become more and more disconnected from each other. And they want to, based on their own insecurities, do more and more on the internet or via text message or their phone or whatever, versus actually face-to-face human communication. So what has always been very relative as far as success or growth, or bringing people into your life that are amazing, that are helping you grow, helping your business grow, helping the world grow, is this concept, and that's personal contact. Personal contact is literally the key to success. Yes, you can have some success, you can have some sales, you can have some money coming in, you can have some opportunity without a lot of this. You have the odd one-off here and there. But if you really want to build something that's really amazing in your life, it takes a tremendous amount of personal contact in order to do that. And in personal contact, there's something very unique that happens. And that is that we have to be willing to be vulnerable in personal contact. There's a lot of components to personal contact, but if we're not willing to be vulnerable, we do something that's very detrimental to this idea, and that is that we put a mask on. So that's either psychologically, emotionally, physically, however we show up. The internet, social media creates the perfect opportunity for people to literally wear a mask in any situation. So they can show up pretending to be something that they're not. And in showing up to pretending to be something that they're not, they're attempting to influence people who are basically hooked into some kind of ideology, where the influencer in that moment actually benefits from it. But because the people that they're reaching don't understand that the influencer in that moment is wearing a mask, they're not making decisions based on real facts, real vulnerability, real consciousness. They're buying into an idea that generally plays off of their own insecurity. So someone who's insecure, that's going to wear a mask in their life to prevent them from experiencing their insecurity, they also have a very good idea of what makes other people insecure. So if I wanted to exploit that in a situation, what I would do is I would look for, how do I hook someone else in order to exploit that opportunity? Because I understand vulnerability. I'm going to wear a mask to cover mine. I'm going to find out what other people's vulnerable places are, and how can I hook them into my own narrative for life or business or whatever it is. That's not really thinking about another person. That's thinking about, it's a selfish thought about your own advantage and not about helping anybody else. It's very important to understand this. And the reason is because if we're going to understand how to move through the situation that we're in right now, we have to really kind of understand our own vulnerability and where we're vulnerable, which has been tremendously amplified. It allows us to know a lot about ourselves. And the more we can actually see in ourselves based on our fears, our insecurities, our worries, our doubts, how we're behaving towards other people, what we're currently afraid of in this moment, tell us a lot about whatever we might be insecure about in this moment, because it's become amplified. It's a tremendous opportunity to learn about yourself and to observe other individuals in the world based on how they're behaving. So last week, Steph Tuss, my CEO, and I had this conversation about how some of our clients and observations of what's going on have hit this very interesting experience where people are literally being shamed, guilted, bashed, bullied, made wrong because they're continuing to do business. They're continuing to charge money. They're continuing to collect money. They're continuing to move forward in this moment. And in many cases, people are continuing to find joy and happiness and peace and calm and all of those things in this moment. And people that are not in that situation are making the ones that are wrong. Why is this important? Over 20 years now, I have experienced human beings stepping away from their programmed self, whatever that might be, into the possibility of their greatness. And the number one thing that I think I've experienced with every single person that has made that journey, including myself, has been that there's someone in their life that they care about that disagrees with their journey. And overcoming that disagreement from the perspective of it's my life, I get to choose what I want to do with my life. And giving yourself permission to be great in your life, do great, experience greatness in your life can be very painful when you have somebody that you care about that completely disagrees with you. And not only disagrees with you, is threatened by the way that you're moving forward and makes you very wrong and uncaring and selfish by your idea of moving forward. So that's something that's been tremendously amplified right now, because people are attacking other people for doing just that. And I think that the individuals that have made a choice to do that really need to understand that by finding a way to be part of the solution in all of this, it's one of the most noble things that you could possibly do. Every person that has the ability, the capability to figure out a way to move through this, keep their business working, their job working, their family together, be positive, have a benefit on other people, is all part of the solution. It helps every single person that needs to rise from this now and when it's over. When we go back to hopefully the life that we knew in a lot of ways. Your participation right now makes a huge difference. If the amplification of hate and greed and wrong-making and judgment and pain influence the people that want to do something and they all stop, the whole damn thing comes crushing terribly down. And it makes the recovery very, very difficult as we move out of the problem. So first of all, I congratulate everybody that's doing something not only to help themselves, but to help other people. People that refuse to allow this as an obstacle to get in their way of continuing to move forward. I think you're all doing the right thing, and I completely commend you on that. I support it 100% because you're being part of the solution, not part of the problem. There is a tremendous amount of ignorance out there that has now been amplified to a great degree. And we need to be very aware that that's amplified because those people are coming after to attack. They're doing it because one of the main things in their life that gives them a false sense of security is this hook. The hook is giving them a false sense of security. So when we buy into the hook, we have to remember right from the very beginning, it's an illusion to begin with. The hook is an illusion to begin with. It has a suggestibility that someone is going to get hurt or someone's going to be in pain that allows you to stay in the hook to begin with. So you can't have a hook without a consequence, right? That's why the idea of Shenpa is a very broad idea. It's not just the idea of being attached to something, but why and how and what are the consequences of the attachment that allow a person to experience, number one, this false security, but be so hooked into the lie that they believe in the promise, because the promise is a false narrative and it affects people every single day. For years, I've watched people who they continue to go through their life believing in this idea of the hook, that from some kind of moral landscape or ethical landscape that they're doing the right thing. But as they go through their life, they're becoming more and more miserable with how they're experiencing life. But they don't know that the hook is the problem. That's what they've bought into that's keeping them from literally escaping into a different level of consciousness, from accepting something new in their life as a different way of thinking, for even thinking for themselves that, you know, something, maybe what I'm doing isn't exactly correct. Maybe some pieces of this that I've taken on in my life as a belief system are not correct. And I need to really think about how I'm going to futuristically think. Maybe there's other information out there. Maybe there's a different way of doing this. The hook, as long as the person's in the hook, it prevents them from getting into that space, which is necessary for every person to be able to continue to move forward. The people that are open and they're open to suggestion of a new idea can contemplate that without being offended, without being so insecure that they can't move forward. They're acceptant of a new idea. So that suffering that is in the idea of Shenpa is based on this. So you might want to write this down. It's based on the urge. Okay. So when I talk about urge, what do I mean? Think about it like this. Pretend you have the craziest freaking itch on your body, like something that itches like crazy. You're aware of the itch. It's like consuming your thought in the emotion. But at that moment, you are conscious of the fact that you have a choice as to whether you scratch that itch or you don't. You have a tremendous urge in that moment to scratch that itch. Tremendous. Like everything in your body is saying, stop this, scratch it, right? It's the urge. It's that intensity, that urgency of that urge that pulls you back into the hook, because the hook is based on your deepest insecurity of yourself. So when we have that insecurity, if we're afraid to address that insecurity, then we have the urge to buy into anything that suggests something completely different. Meaning that right now we have huge amplification of fear, huge amplification of how this is going to affect everybody forever. Like you've got health amplification, you have financial amplification, you have social amplification, you have judgment from society amplification, you have your personal life, like your family, all that, like all these different threats coming at us at one time, where right or wrong, true or not true, as a society, we've bought into many, many beliefs around these things that are basically illusions. And because society runs those illusions very well, most of us never have to really address them in any way. But the biggest one, like the overall illusion that kind of covers them all, is that there is this idea of security where if we be something or do something specific, that we'll have that security forever. Like we'll be safe from anything that can actually happen. The idea of that, the foundation of that idea is, is inherently wrong. There is no security. There is no security. There's only adaptation to situations. There's only adaptation to what we experience. And how we adapt is based on intelligence. It's based on consciousness. It's based on not being hooked and being able to evaluate from a place of really understanding how the laws work, so that you can really significantly think about what is the result that you want to create in your life? What is the life you want to create in your life? And because the idea that negativity in itself is bad isn't really true. We have to look at the negativity. If you watch the previous episodes of this, I talk about how positivity, negativity, good, bad, wealth, poverty, right, wrong, they're all part of the same thing. Our experience of those things is basically how we use our conscious thought, how we choose to use our conscious thought to understand that experience and to create that experience in our life. However we use our thinking, whether we're hooked or not, determines how we experience all of those things in our life right now. So as we're going through this, if we want to change that experience, we have to understand what's hooked us into the previous experience. Because here's how you know if there's anything there at all. Are you getting emotionally charged or triggered or responsive around the negativity, around the possibility of what they tell you could possibly happen? If that boils something up in you, then you know that there's something there. If it completely is paralyzing you, if you're in anger, if you're in frustration, if you're in judgment of other people, if you find all your time looking at what won't work or why you can't do something, then you really have to think about the idea that something has really hooked you emotionally based on the vulnerabilities that you have before you came into this. It's just amplified it in a very big way. So what we want to do is we want to understand that that urge to stay in being hooked needs to be lessened and then eventually removed. But we can't do that without the consciousness that actually goes with it. And ultimately what it does is that it opens up the possibility of opportunity for each and every one of us to allow us to move forward in a way where we can get our needs met, where we can get our desires met, where we get our finances met, where we get everything met. Because what does it do? It allows you to start going in and gathering information without being further triggered. So the people that I find that are in denial right now, they don't want to look at anything. They've just made up their mind that this is no big deal. And, it'll turn around when it turns around. It hasn't personally affected them yet necessarily. But that's kind of the mindset they're in. Well, why are they in that mindset and not actually looking at the facts? Because the facts suggest something that is contrary to the hook that they bought into. It's contrary to the belief that they've bought into about how the world works and how they set up their life in order to be safe. So when I'm looking at, if I'm going to go on the internet and I'm going to start searching for the facts and the options that I have to move forward, I can't do that without acknowledging that there's a problem. And if I'm in denial, I'm not acknowledging that there's a problem. So it amplifies everything. The more we pull back, the more we resist, the more we stay negative, the more we deny that there's an issue. But in the Buddhist philosophy about attachment, what is that actually doing? It's causing us to attach to a belief that is completely irrelevant at this moment. It may have worked and allowed you to stay in some kind of hallucination over your life the way life was 4 weeks ago, but it's not relevant today because all of those or most of those principles and rules have significantly changed. And if you don't do something different, if you don't understand the rules currently, you're really putting yourself at risk for not being up to date when things change and they reach you. Okay. So I think it was on the very first call that I did on uncertainty was I was trying to explain the magnitude of the situation and that it's changed life as we know it. And it's like we're putting our life on a pause, like our normal life. We're hitting pause. Okay. We're hitting pause on our normal life. And we've instantly been thrust into this different life that we have to begin to understand how it's changed. What are the rules? How do we not only survive, but thrive through this situation so that people could understand, because our mind is wired, literally hardwired to the way life used to work. It's not wired to live in this circumstance. So we have to be very conscious right now about making intelligent ideas, and intelligent ideas are based in the facts that we're experiencing. It's based in the information that we're getting. It's based in the evaluation, and then really coming to the place where we identify that those evaluations are correct so that we're making the right decision. If we're hooked at the same time, we're not going to want to see it. We're not going to want to see it. Like it's literally the crux of where people go into major issues with their own personal decisions because they weren't willing to look at something because it threatened what they currently believed in. So I want you to just consider that based on how you're responding. And I think what would really be a really good thing for everybody, it's a really good lesson in the idea of enlightenment or consciousness or pattern breaking, moving forward, whatever you want to put all those things together, is to also observe how people are responding, reacting to this, because it becomes very apparent when you start to see rage and anger and blame and finger pointing that there's another agenda at work. And many times we can see the surface agenda, like there's a huge political agenda going on right now, but you have to ask a different question. What is the agenda under that? And what is the agenda under that? And bring it all the way down to the individual. What is the personal agenda? What is it they're fighting for when they're angry, when they're blaming, when they're making people wrong, when they're shaming, when they're guilty? What are they actually doing for themselves, or what do they think they're doing, but in an unconscious state? It always comes back to some kind of self-preservation. Every single time, it comes back to some kind of self-preservation. They don't inherently know that they're doing something wrong. It's only the way that they can respond to a chaotic world when they've bought into false beliefs about a false world to begin with. But we just didn't have anything that blew it up, that threatened it all that bad. Now we're in a situation where, because everything is literally amplified, it's literally causing us to go into this space of shit. Like, I don't know what to do. Everything that were my opportunities before, or my ability to choose before, almost all of it's gone. So now what do I do? And I'm listening to all these people, many people I don't even agree with or whatever. And I'm getting 100 different messages in 100 different directions. I don't know what to do. So then there's this idea of like shutting down, or there's the idea of escaping. Like, what is it? How are you individually experiencing this? Okay. So let's shift this. So now, once you uncover that, once you like see how you're doing it, the way out of this is to understand how you're responding. Ask yourself a very hard question, and that is, what is it that I believe in this world, or my time in this world, or about anything that you're experiencing? Always look at your challenge. Your challenge will always tell you where you're lacking consciousness, right? Because that's the place to grow. So it's very specific to the individual in this moment. But how do we pull out of this and actually use the amplification, not for bad, but actually use it for good? And it's in this idea right here, that personal contact is the key to success. So if we're feeling vulnerable right now, hang on one second. If we're feeling vulnerable, if we're trying to hold on to the world that used to be, we can't be focused on this. This will actually scare us to some degree. Keep in mind that part of the reason I'm talking about this topic is that there are people out there that are intentionally trying to scare you. It may not be for everybody on this call, but there are people out there that are like attacking other people on social media and stuff because they're attempting to do better right now. So it comes down to personal contact. Now, when we have personal contact traditionally, we communicate on a physical level basically in three ways. We have words, we have gestures, and we have writing. So we're communicating in those ways. Like I'm communicating that way with you right now. So you have my words, right? Even though it's through video, I'm communicating through words, I'm communicating through gestures, and I'm communicating through writing. Very much of our communication with other individuals is this way. But what's important to understand is that these are one thing, but the most powerful thing is how we're communicating energetically to another individual, because that is the point that resonates with another individual as to whether they can trust you, whether they can accept what you're offering, how you identify people that actually really want help and will do something with it right now. It makes all the difference. So we're literally communicating on two planes. We have the physical plane, words, gestures, and writing, but we're also communicating on an energetic plane, which causes a person to react one of two ways. They either go into a fear, self-preservation mode, or they go into a growth mode. It's one of those two ways. And here's what I mean by that. So this is a teaching that I often teach in sales seminars when I'm talking about how we communicate with other individuals, both consciously and unconsciously. And very often there's actually two dynamics that are going on in a person. You have what they're consciously focused on that they need to create in their life, and then you have their unconscious vulnerabilities and insecurities. And it's the unconscious that has the most energy and that is communicating to other people on a consistent basis. Like we're never really stopping that. So if I'm afraid right now, if I am worried, if I am it's still believing in some kind of a hook, then what happens is that through words, I'm communicating to you about different topics, but my energy is communicating something very, very different. And the other person, excuse me, responds to that energy. And very often they don't understand it. All they know is that in the interaction with you, they react to something. It's either good or it's negative. So what happens? What happens is that when they feel your energy, an image goes into their mind. It's either good or it's negative. It's good or negative. If they have a negative feeling, they want to move away from you. If they have a good feeling, they want to move toward you. In a moment of amplification, we have something else. We have an outside energy. So I'll just put an A here for amplification. We have an outside energy that's being communicated to both people. And it's coming in the same way. It's coming in through words, gestures, and writing. It's everything that's being communicated right now. So it's not just the paradigm that a person is experiencing based on the way that they normally see life, but now there's a different insecurity showing up. So you have a person's insecurity about doing something to move forward with their life in general. Forget the crisis, in general. And part of their journey in life is to overcome that, to step into their highest self. And that is done by what they actually bring into your life. In this situation, it's worse than that, because there's the amplification of the outside suggestion. There's the amplification of the outside fear. There's the amplification of the outside consequence that is targeting their own hook in life, which is where they have bought into security. This is a big deal because now they don't trust themselves, which is something that they relied on for a long period of time. Like, I can close down, I can just be in my world and everything will be okay. Not necessarily so now. Now they have this outside influence that's coming in that tells them what? The world is going to hell in a handbasket. And they can't find anything that grounds them. They can't find their own grounding in life. So they're extremely vulnerable, but they're more vulnerable to negative suggestions than they are to positive. That's why they're gossiping. They can't get out of the news. They're talking about everything that's going to go wrong. Like it's really bad. Understanding this as a business owner or a person that wants to help is very, very important. Because if you can't move somebody in their thinking, if you can't get them out of that, if you stay in it too long, there's a very good chance they'll convince you that they're right. Why? Because everybody's assuredness of life has been questioned just a little bit. If you're honest, you know that there's a little glitch that's been going on that says, this is really interesting. Like, this is something that nobody's ever seen before. And it really questions, like, how is life working? What's going on? What caused this? What does this mean? Like, ultimately. So that is, if we're not careful with that, there's a little opening in our mind, and anything can get in there and begin to increase that wedge. And if you're not careful, their thoughts can infiltrate any insecurity. And even if we have a teeny tiny insecurity going on inside of us, it can be exploited if we're not careful. It can be exploited and grown. You could be conscious for 20 years and never sucked into another person's story or drama in their life or negativity. given the right circumstance at the right time in your life, it can create just a little opening where it can get in if you're not careful. This is one of those situations. And the reason is because of how big it is, how amplified it is, and how many different areas it is hitting all of our lives. So it has a potential to get into many different areas. And if you're not careful, if you start focusing on it, it begins to become amplified. Once it becomes amplified, you're not of service really to yourself, but you're really not of service to anybody else. So the idea is that you don't allow that amplification into really your own life, and you start focusing on what is it that you're really communicating to other people, and what are they communicating to you. So it's also very easy to determine if somebody is doing something right now that is really not about helping anybody else but themselves. It's completely self-serving, right? It's good to be aware of that, okay? You have to make your own individual decision on when you run into someone like that as to what it is you're going to do or not. But you'll pick up on it. You'll totally pick up on it. When you start to really think, you can tell whether or not somebody has something that can benefit people to keep moving forward, or is it just taking advantage of a scary situation or a painful situation. But there's like a little dividing line in this that I think it's important for everybody to know. A lot of people that are looking for ways to move forward are scared. So scared becomes part of the way that we identify certain people to be able to help them, because we know if they're scared, we know if they're having problems, that they need help somewhere. That's not exploitation. That is observation. That is observation. If we're coming from a place of saying, I have something that can help you move forward and you're scared, here's how I can show you how to do that. I'm identifying them by the fear, but I'm not exploiting their fear. I'm trying to help them move out of fear. A person who's exploiting fear is really looking at the fear and they're saying, okay, sucker, you're in fear. I can get you basically to do anything as long as you believe in another hook. And then that's what it is they do. So there's a very big difference. For those of you that are struggling with this yourself, like you have a business, you know at heart it's actually going to do something good. But because of all the trash that's going on online, you start to feel your emotions start to get mixed up. You start to feel guilty. You start to feel shame. You don't know if you're doing right. You don't know if you're doing wrong. Am I really exploiting people or not because of everything that's going on? You know whether or not your product or service helps a person right now or it doesn't. You know that. You inherently know that. You have to be careful not to let that get in your mind, because then the people that are in fear, a lot of them want to get out. They just don't know how. Yes, there is a demographic of people that want to be in fear and anger and pain and resentment and victimization and entitlement, and all they want to do is blame. They don't want anybody to fix the problem. They don't want anybody to lead them to fix the problem. Stay the hell away from those people. You just focus on the people that you can benefit, that you can actually do something for in your life. And the idea here that I've gone over probably 100 times by now, in order to change this emotion, if we're giving off any kind of vulnerability or negative emotion, is to really fundamentally understand that the universe is good all the time, God is good all the time, spirit is good all the time. It's always for expansion, expression, fuller development, but not removal of choice. So that means that we have to consciously stay in gratitude so that we can begin to control the emotional state that we're in, so that we're not communicating something that's based in fear to someone else, but actually something that's based in gratitude and help and good, so that a person will feel that in their heart, and it will have more of a calming effect with them than it does everything else. So the importance of this is to understand that there's a tremendous amount of amplification going on that we can all benefit from. And we can benefit from in many ways, but it's also a cautionary tale. It's a very cautionary tale, because you don't want to be susceptible to the suggestion. You want to know the facts. You don't want them to create a wedge in your mind by anything that you're insecure about. However, if you are insecure, you want to write that down. Where are my vulnerabilities? Where do I feel vulnerable? Do I feel vulnerable in my family, in my finances, in my work, in my business, in my health? Where do I feel vulnerable? And those are places of indication that you can actually go to work on yourself and begin to shore those up. How do we do that? We really understand how the laws work, and we understand that the removal of the vulnerability comes from personal choice. As we make conscious choices around an area that we're vulnerable, we start to create action in those areas and understand that we are the creators of that experience. And we can create a new experience, which gives us a new result, which then gives us the feedback to change the belief system that's causing us to be vulnerable. Be careful of being hooked right now. Hooked is attachment, but it's much more than that. It's the Shenpa idea, which is attachment with a dangerous outcome that causes you to have the urge to react emotionally and instantly over something based out of whatever your attachment is, which is generally fear-based. It's a tremendous insecurity for people that are actually experiencing it, because they don't know how to make decisions or how to be create the environment to get the resources, be resourceful in this current time. It's not resonating with their mind because they only know the way that we did it before. And they became very adept at living that way. This has turned the apple cart upside down, and we now have to understand that it's very different. So we go into the surrender of that, which means we stop resisting what is not the way that it was before. If we walk around all day wishing it was different, we're consistently resisting. We're not in surrender. The idea is that we surrender to it, we understand what the parameters are, and we begin to work intelligently in that situation to literally create what it is that we desire in our life. And every one of us has the ability to do that. I don't need to look into everybody's life individually. I can tell you that you have the ability to do that. Those are what the laws are based on. But it requires that you begin to engage your own thinking and think in a different way than you ever have before. Think about possibility, not fear. Think about, you don't want to, it's not that so I talked about the idea of negativity. What that means is looking at the negative is not bad. It tells us the opposite side of the positive, like everything's cause and effect. If we make the wrong choices, we'll experience a negative. Is it negative to look at it and see what it is? No, not at all. It helps us make good decisions. But when we're negative about the negative, that's when it actually causes a problem. That's when we get emotionally sucked into the idea of what could go wrong. That's when it can attach to our vulnerability and our emotions and the idea of how do we stay safe in this situation, which is not the idea that we really want to think about. All of the parameters are put up, like how to stay safe in a healthy way, all of that, great. But how do we actually move forward is what we really need to be thinking about. So, Steph, if you want to come online, I'm going to have a seat, and we can open it up for questions.
Okay, if you've got a question, go ahead and post it in the Q&A, please, not the chat. And while I'm waiting for people to post questions, I have just a brief announcement. Tomorrow, we are hosting a very special 3-hour live stream titled Unwavering Resistance, How to Rise Up in the Face of Adversity. And David's going to be taking these teachings even deeper. So if you haven't yet registered, I'm going to put the link right here for you to register. If you have already registered and you click this link, you're going to get an error message because you can only register once. But you go ahead and register and join us tomorrow. If you can't be there for all 3 hours, or you can't be there at all for any of the 3 hours, register anyway and you'll get access to watch the replay, so you can do it on your own time. All right, David, we've got a lineup of questions.
Let's do it.
Okay. First question is from Mo. She sent 2 posts, so I'm going to kind of condense these a little bit. So she says, without getting into political alliances or differences, I've begun to greatly lessen my intake of certain politicians who I don't believe are giving realistic facts. Instead, have their agendas in the guise of hope, yet not in reality, not in facts. Yet I want to be informed. So what's the best way to stay informed and cut through the BS? So what she's asking is, what she says is, what I mean is to cut through to find the truth versus things that are not factual or based in deliberate misinformation.
Yeah. So I think that if you, there's plenty of people out there that are professionals that aren't politicians, that are working to solve this problem, and they're all putting out information as to those very specific answers. And they're giving, but you have to understand though, excuse me, every professional is also giving their opinion of the situation, their opinion of what works, what doesn't, their opinion of what you should do and what shouldn't do. So you need to collect this information and then decide for yourself what is the best course of action for yourself. That if you're coming from, if you live in the United States, you're coming from like a legal perspective, you could look at the bill that was passed. That is very specific, and it tells you what your advantages are there. From a health perspective, you can look at like the Johns Hopkins site. There's various different podcasts around this. I think the doctors at the very top of this that are communicating with us on a regular basis are trying to give us the best information possible. But I do think this, and I will tell you, I'm going to preface this with, this is my opinion. I do not know that this is fact. This is my opinion. And from the very beginning and watching how they're disseminating information, we have to understand something very important. And that is the idea that too much of a disaster at one time can cause a disaster. So I believe that they are giving us information systematically as they continue to inform us of the magnitude of this. That's why we see states one at a time going into shelter in place instead of the whole government doing it. We really would have a big problem if they just shut everything down instantly and told us the complete nasty truth about everything. You'd probably have panic in the streets, which would cause a problem in our country that we could not handle. We could not handle that. Like, there's too many damn people. We have almost 350 million people in this country. How do you control 350 million people if everything goes apeshit? So there is also a responsibility of like, yes, we have to be honest with the public, but we also have to keep the public safe from themselves. And that's a very real reality that people have to consider. So I will just say that it's my opinion. I don't know that that's what they're doing. I really think they are, but I want you to know it's my opinion. So that's what I think, Mo. Thanks for your question.
Okay, David, next question is from Chuck. There's always opportunity in crisis. What is the best way to take off the blinders of society in order to see all that is available amidst the fear and panic?
It's looking for where you can make a difference. That's what it really is. It's looking for where do people need help. I said this right from day one. If we take the focus off ourselves, if we take the focus off self-preservation and say, where can I be of benefit? You already know where you can be of benefit. Like, you know your business, you know your skill sets, you know what you have the ability to do, but you have to look at where the problems are, and then it'll like connect in your head. You'd be like, oh, I could help there. I could do this. I could change this. I could be a benefit here. You have to get on there and do the research and see where people are having problems. And if you're not finding it on the internet, start making phone calls, start calling people, start texting them, start emailing them, find out who's having problems, what they are. And I guarantee you something will show up that you can be a benefit for. And then you have to find those people. Like, if you have a business, you have to find more of those people that you can help.
Next question is coming from Becca. What are some ways we can strengthen our belief in God is good all the time? How can we trust when there are things that happen in our lives and others that seem impossible to be for good?
Yeah. So this is a really great question. And I spent most of my 20s really trying to answer this question, because I was raised in a very dualistic society where one side it was like God's good, and then the other side you see everything going crazy. So here's the way that this is. We have to understand this fundamental principle. Human beings were given the choice, the free choice over their life, and they have creative ability. So they have the creative ability to choose life. They also have the ability to either be a blessing in someone's life or be a tragedy in someone's life. Every human being has that power and that potential. We don't all have the consciousness of that, though. And that's where it starts to get murky. Many of us were taught that there is a God that's very much like Santa Claus, that like sits on a cloud, watches over everybody, says yes to this person, no to that person. However, if you just look at history, you'll see that that is a ludicrous idea and completely impossible. Because anybody that ever says that to me, I'm like, how do you explain tragedies like Hitler and the Jews killing, all the Jews being killed, or Pol Pot or Stalin, like all the tragedies, like massive in life? Why didn't God come down and save those people? I think it's utter bullshit, that idea. And yes, I'm very emotional about that idea because I think it does such a disservice to people where they believe that either God is going to protect them for something, or God is going to do something, or God is going to set up a situation in their life. Everything in the universe has to be for life, but it's secular. That means that everything is in a constant state of evolution. So like you look at spring, you look at winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. It goes through a cycle. It's a cycle of birth, thriving, death, rebirth. But it's not complete death where it's utter extermination. It goes back to its origin. So when the leaves fall off the trees, when the flowers wither and die, as it goes into the earth, it becomes part of the earth and it turns into nutrition for the earth, and then it provides for a rebirth. Everything operates that way. So what's the principle that's behind that? It's more life, but all life has to go through this ebb and flow to keep sustaining and moving forward. All life has a birth-death cycle to it, and it has a different timeline on that. But it's not death in where it's completely gone forever. There's a new cycle that shows up. So if we understand that we have the power to choose, we understand that in the lifetime that we're in, we have the power to create our life the way that we want it. We have an extreme amount of suggestion that that's not true, but it's only not true by the people that tell the story about it not being true. If we take the story away from the way people talk about life, they talk about tragedies and good things, bad things and good things, all that, and you just look at it as a result, it becomes very easy to see the truth. For people that struggle with seeing the truth, I always ask you this question. Does it exist in nature? Like if you just look at nature that's unencumbered by man and look at nature and see how nature operates, do you see those problems in nature? The answer is always no. We see it in human beings because there's two things in human beings that nature doesn't have: consciousness and the ability to be programmed with unconscious truth. Nature operates by instinct, and it always tells it what to do. So human beings have that, but we're programmed not to use it because we literally have come up with an alternate way to live life. And most of us are trained that way from birth, and then that becomes the functionality of how we actually think. Part of it's okay, but it's not based in the absolute truth about how everything works. So you have to study to get to that absolute truth, and you have to do it. You can't just read it. You have to do it and see the result. When you see that it works, you'll be 100% convinced. You'll drop your old belief system that you think keeps you safe and realize that it doesn't, and now you'll be empowered to create your life however you want, and you'll also understand why people go through really bad things when they do.
Thanks, David.
Josh.
Next question is coming from Rosa. How do we keep growing even if our spouse chooses hooks and manipulation as the only way they know how to communicate?
Probably don't. You probably don't. The sad fact of this is that when anybody is any kind of a toxic relationship, now there's a difference between toxic and dysfunctional. Dysfunctional is basically everybody. None of us are perfect. So we're always working at making things better. But toxic is when somebody wants to stop you from being you. They want to abuse you in one way or another. They want to take away your freedom of choice. They want you to only do things their way. Like, all those things make a relationship toxic. If we're in a relationship like that, we're emotionally open to an individual, that person's in our life, it is going to be extremely difficult for any person in that situation to move forward. That is not love. That is abuse. That is not love. It's addiction. So you need to study it. You need to educate yourself around it, and you need to get out of it.
Thanks, David. Next question from Vanessa. What's the difference between being vulnerable with personal contact and facing your vulnerabilities?
I think they're one and the same, actually. So facing your vulnerabilities requires courage. It's when you accept that you're going to stop judging yourself. And I think it's the same thing when we deal with other people. So when we're in a vulnerable situation with another person, you have your own vulnerability and you have their vulnerability. If you can remove the idea of judgment from those two things, like you're willing to be wrong, you're willing to be foolish in that moment, you're willing to make a mistake, you take all the power of that judgment that can hurt you or make you take it personally or another person personally away. It goes away. And you're able to deal with the truth of the moment, both for yourself and another individual. And you're also able to see the possibility. So I think it's removing the judgment for both sides, like when you do it personally and in a situation, and being open to whatever the truth is. I think those are the similarities in that situation.
Thank you. Next question is from Patrick. How can we interact harmoniously and positively with a positive attitude if we encounter bullies trying to coerce conformity to their ways and beliefs, including when those bullies are violent, whether psychologically or physically, as part of the government? I have no fear of a virus. I don't even believe it exists as a pandemic. My fear is of cult followers and government leaders who try to coerce conformity to their beliefs. I'd healed 99% of these issues before this hoopla began, but the remaining 1% has been amplified here.
Well, I think that the way that I understand what's going on is different than what a lot of people are thinking about the virus. When they think about the virus itself, yeah, like what they're doing, you have to understand something. Like, something that is very dangerous is being done by a lot of people. They're comparing it to other viruses or diseases. And I think that in that comparison, we really do some very serious damage, because if we say, well, it's not as bad as this, or it's worse than this, then we're determining how bad or it is right now based on that comparison. That's a very dangerous thing. I think that what everybody is really scared about when you get right down to it is actually not the death rate of the virus, but how fast it hits hospitals at the same time. That's the problem that they have in Italy. That's the problem that they're really worried about, because the healthcare system anywhere can't, if people don't get on top of it, they can't deal with it at the same time. So you can believe whatever it is that you want. If you believe that it doesn't exist, then shut the damn TV off and don't listen to anybody and go about your life. It's your choice.
Thanks, David. Next question. This is from Suzanne. When you talk about the hooks that cause people to be in denial, do you think one of these hooks is the idea in the metaphysical community that they don't need to pay attention to physical precautions? Are they grasping at security by looking only at the spiritual and energetic side of things?
Yes, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's called spiritual bypassing. It does nobody any good, and it's using spirituality in a detrimental way, like a drug or alcohol abuse or something like that. It's asinine. We live on three planes of understanding simultaneously. We live on the spiritual, intellectual, and the physical plane all at the same time. No one is more spiritual or holy than the other. They're all equal. They're all forms of expression. And to say that I'm just going to stay in the spiritual plane and deny the physical is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. it's just as ludicrous as people saying that the physical is the only thing to believe in and there's no spiritual perspective. Both of those ideas are ludicrous. You have to take into consideration all three of those things. All three of those things. Because look at it this way. You can say you're as spiritual as you want to be, baby, but you live in a physical world. So that's what it is. That's the deal. It's understanding, how do I integrate all of those three things to live the life that I really want? But the reason that people will do that with spirituality is because they don't want to deal with certain pains or realistic things that are in their life. So they say, well, I'm just going to escape and be completely spiritual and shut off the physical world. With the problem being that they still live in a physical world. So to me, it's not healthy. Like, we know it's spiritual bypassing. We know that it's not good. It does not allow a person to live a fully realistic and holistic life. You can be part of the physical world and still live a very spiritual existence, because spirituality is about awareness. It's being aware that you're also a spiritual being in this physical experience, and understanding what the laws of that are and how it operates with and through both the spiritual, the intellect, and the physical at the same time.
Yeah, it's like trusting God, but don't forget to tie up your camel. Like,
Exactly.
God, but wash your damn hands. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, next question is from Martin. How do you keep up or protect your physical, mental, and emotional energy and prevent energy vampires from draining you at this time?
Stay away from them. Stay away from them. It's, you control your environment. That, you know what's behind this question? What's behind this question is, I have family that's negative. I have friends that are negative. I have people that I care about that are negative. And they don't know how to change it. You can't change another person. So your only option is to shut them off. That's it. And it's the option that none of us want to deal with, because these are people that we care about. The truth is, you back away from them. You don't spend as much time with them. And when you're with them, you don't spend as long with them. You have to separate yourself from those influences.
Thank you. Next question is from Frank. I have been stuck in regret. Looking back, I realize I haven't taken care of myself financially. Many good and positive things have taken place, but now I see when I had opportunities, I truly didn't realize the opportunity. Now I'm concerned of not taking and recognizing opportunity. What can I look for and do to take advantage in the midst of regret?
So regret is looking at the past. You're living in the past with your current consciousness. That is foolish, because you can't have done something different. You did what you did from the state of consciousness of what you did. So it's about accepting that to start off with. Regret is the urge that I talked about. It's exactly that. Like, emotionally wants to suck you down a tunnel, but it keeps you in the same place, which will cause you to regret in the future. So the idea is, let the past go, learn from it, and be grateful for what is now, and look for opportunities to help right now. Let the past go. Just let it go. That's it. It's in the past. It's not even real anymore. It's only a memory. It doesn't define you either. What you do now, who you become now, how you make decisions now with your current consciousness, that's what defines you now. It doesn't even define you in the future. It defines you now, because that's the only time that is actually real, is now.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
This is from Candace. I think it's how you pronounce her name. I called my vendor to share gratitude and check in on him. He was very moved and really inspired. Now he's calling me every day to tell me how depressed he is. Do you have a recommendation of what I can say to him? Thank you.
I would ask him, I would say, I understand you're depressed. I have empathy around that. I understand. And the question is, what do you really want? Do you want to stay depressed or not? If you don't want to stay depressed, then you need to be part of your own healing. You need to take responsibility for your own result. And if you want some help, if you're willing to help that person, then help them. If you're not willing to help them, then back away from it. Guide them into some kind of help that they need, but ask them what they want, and then take it from there. If they say, I just want to stay depressed and complain all the time, then you might be better backing away from that. And you know what? We have freedom of choice. People can make the choice to be as miserable as they want to be, and that's okay. You don't have to be in that person's life. You don't have to experience it.
Next question is from Lisa. Can you give examples of how to be more vulnerable in order to be more successful? I'm still unclear on that.
Yeah, it's allowing yourself to be the authentic you without worrying about what other people think. That's like the basic idea right there. So vulnerability is like, we all have this authenticity of how we want to show up in life, who we want to be, how we want to express that, what we want to experience. And it changes like over time. Like we want to express and experience different parts of ourselves. To be vulnerable is to say, I'm going to do that with someone, and I don't really give a shit what they think. They may laugh at me, they may not like me, they reject me, but I'm going to allow myself to do that anyway, because that's my experience. And then if I'm with somebody that can't appreciate me for me doing that, then that's not somebody that I really want in my life. But through expression is the only way we get to know who we truly are. If we stifle that expression, if we won't allow ourselves to be vulnerable in those moments, then we become what everybody else wants us to be. And that is a miserable life for anybody who does that.
Okay, we've still got a little bit more time. We've got another question. This question is from Patty. I have set myself some goals during this time, but find that I feel overwhelmed and end up doing nothing. We've heard this actually a lot from other people that we've spoken to in the last couple of weeks. What would you suggest?
So when a person is overwhelmed, it is a way of going into confusion. And when a person goes into confusion, they don't have to do anything. Overwhelm is a representation of fear. So it is another representation of fear. We want to realize, what we want to address is, what is it that I'm afraid of? It appears like I've got so much to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to get it all done. And then we just shut down. But actually, it is the fear of getting something done. So you have to ask yourself, what is it the fear of? And a lot of times it's the fear that we might make a mistake because we have so much to do, that will appear foolish or will be wrong or will be judged in some way. You have to look inside your life and ask yourself, what is it you're really afraid of by everything that you have to do? And then embrace that, really embrace it, because it's not anything that you really need to be afraid of. And if something needs to change, have the courage to change it. If it's too much and you need to delegate to other people, or you need to tell people you can't do something, then that's what you do. You take responsibility for the situation. You say, here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can give my word will get done. And you're going to delegate the rest, or you're going to deny the rest.
Question from Melissa. I love that you're talking about vulnerability, but wanted to clarify, is being vulnerable a positive or a negative?
It's positive. It's total positive. Absolutely 100% positive to be vulnerable, because as long as you go into it with the consciousness of not taking any feedback from your vulnerability personally, that's exactly what you want to do, because it gets you to know you. It gets you to the power of you, to the authenticity of you. We don't really want to give a shit what anybody thinks about our vulnerability. We want to be vulnerable. And in our authenticity, in our vulnerability, we will actually reach the people that we can do the most good with. The people that we can't will be the ones that judge you for it. Just remove those people from your life and keep focusing on the people that are receptive to who you are authentically.
Okay, last question. This might be a little bit redundant, but I think it's worth mentioning again, because it seems like the big topic for this is boundaries around communicating with people who don't want to change. What you created word for word is what one of my family members is experiencing or displaying. I have tried scripture, trust, financial support, transformation, conversation, kind words, but due to her negative experience in the church, she thinks transformative work is similar. Second, she wants my other sister to leave her job at the hospital in fear of her contracting COVID. We have not found any way of speaking to calm her concerns. Do you have a recommendation in what I can say that will have her look inside her own beliefs?
I actually don't. If you've tried all those different things, we have to take a step back from a person that is being so resistant to any kind of guidance, because I really believe that we have no business stepping into another person's experience, no matter how it is, how bad it is, as long as they're an adult, no matter how bad it is, until they ask for help. Because the statistics show across the board that people don't change until they're ready to. So usually we bring on just a tremendous amount of anxiety and animosity and all kinds of crap when we begin to try to change somebody, or we want them to change more than they want to change. So if you look at this person and ask yourself, how is this person actually experiencing the world? They're internalizing fear as themselves. They see so many things that threaten their security, including their emotional security, that they want everything else to stop so that they don't have to feel bad. Like they don't want the other family member to work in a hospital, because if that person gets it and dies, they will personally feel horrific, and they don't want to experience that. It has nothing to do with the person that's working in the hospital. There are people that are working in the hospital that feel called to do that as part of their life mission. We have no business interrupting them in what they've chosen for their life, even if it means the possibility of their own death. This is their choice. We don't have the right to take away another person's choice. Everybody has to choose what they want. That doesn't mean that you have to be around them or that you have to change them. If you see that this person does not want your help, accept it. You need to ask yourself, if you can't accept it, you're more like this person than you actually really want to be, because you want them to stop so you feel better. If they're choosing to be negative, if they're choosing to go into drama town and they don't want to change it, they don't want any help from you, let them alone and go do your thing. Mind your own business, because we can't change somebody that doesn't want help. You have to address, why is it that you want this person to change so much, and deal with that issue.
Thanks. And I have just one clarifying question. This one's coming from Karen. David, someone inquired about the facts. I'm somewhat confused about the response, which sounded like we do not know all the facts. It would be counterproductive. Is this correct?
Probably. Yeah, it probably is. You have to, I think people need to really realize, like, put political agenda aside. Think about the structure of our nation and the structure of the world. If everything that we know is normal is removed in a week, you're going to have chaos because of how many people go into panic over that. We've already seen it in small amounts, like the hoarding that's been going on in stores, the hoarding of medical supplies. This is a form of panic. If we shut everything down all at once, people are going to go nuts. Like, there's going to be a sector of individuals that cannot accept it, or they want to use it to their advantage, and you literally have like rioting in the streets and stuff. I believe the government really understands that perspective. And while they have to give us as much information as they can and tell us how to stay safe, they're not going to bring the extreme into the moment, because they also have a responsibility to try to keep us safe. So if you really watch what's been happening, you'll see that they've been giving us information over a period of a few weeks in order to move us into a specific space, which is where we are and where we're going. It gets a little more each day, a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. I don't believe they didn't know this from the very beginning, but I think if they just came out and said all of this at one time, and that the country and the whole world had to lock down, I think you'd have just people could not emotionally deal with that much of a change in their life all at one time. It would threaten so many issues of a person's personal experience. I don't think, however, that they're really holding anything back that's catastrophic that we need to know about. Like, I don't think there's anything like that going on. I just think it is the timing in which they release the information so that everybody can psychologically move with it and be in this space. That's what I think.
All right. Thank you. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and this is the completion of training 3 of how to navigate uncertainty support program. Keep in mind, we've got all kinds of resources on the Facebook group. Send us your questions, we'll answer. And we hope to see you all tomorrow on our very special 3-hour live stream. Any last words, David?
Nope. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining me. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them below and let's continue the conversation.